Mike, where I want to get started is I think the first topic that we have on the docket is the mindset and strategic themes for running a PPC campaign for a startup or new business initiative. So to give some context, you and I were riffing about this earlier. Yes, new businesses and startups can start their operations and they need also like a campaign for those. But also, we were talking about earlier, I've encountered a lot of businesses where we'll come in there and they're like, okay, yeah. We have our solidified business, but we're starting a new venture, new brand, new product, new software, whatever. And we want to run marketing campaigns for those. So I think that's a great starting point where I think you have a lot of expertise. And so again, can you talk to running a PPC campaign for essentially a net new business or product or service?
If you don't mind, before I get into speaking specifically about a campaign, I always like to give this analogy, it's not an analogy, it's a true story. Are you aware of the Stockdale paradox?
I am not, but I'm excited because I love when I get to learn a new thing like that. Okay, what is that?
Okay, so whenever I talk about a topic like this, I try to get into the psychology of what it takes to be successful before talking about the campaigns itself. And the reason why is whenever you're dealing with startup or just a new business initiative, a new silo in the business that's trying to launch on its own, what has worked in the past oftentimes doesn't apply to what's going to work this time around. And you essentially are starting off with a lot less than a previous or a legacy. And so when I tell people all the time, I like to talk about what's called the Stockdale paradox. There's a man by the name of Admiral James Stockdale or Jim Stockdale. He was actually the most senior officer held in what was known as the Hanoi Hilton during the Vietnam War. Notorious POW camp. It was the most brutal place you could ever be on Earth. He was held captive for 7.5 years. At one point, the North Vietnamese military wanted to use him as propaganda. And so he actually took a blade and sliced his head and his scalp open so they wouldn't be able to use him for any propaganda. They tried to put a pad on him to hide the cuts. And he took a bench in his cell and literally disfigured his own face so they couldn't use him. He eventually made it back home, became the president of the Citadel, became a lecturer at Stanford, just one of those amazing people. And he was asked at one point, after spending 7.5 years in literal hell, why did some troops make it and others not make it home? His answer was amazing. He said, it's pretty simple. The ones who didn't make it home all thought they'd be home by Christmas, right? So these troops, they get held as prisoners, they become POWs, and they think, you know what? The U.S. is the strongest military in the world. We'll be out of here by Christmas. Well, Christmas comes and goes, and they're still there. And then they think, we'll be home by Easter. And Easter comes and goes. And then they think we'll be home by Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving passes. Next thing you know, you're at Christmas again. And essentially, Admiral Stockdale realized these soldiers just died of a broken heart. And so he came up with what's called the Stockdale paradox. And there's two parts to it. One, it's understand the brutal truth of your reality. And the second part is yet with an unwavering faith that you will prevail in the end. Right. And a lot of startups, a lot of these new initiatives, they have that second part. Oh, this is new. We have a new great idea. This is going to be amazing. Yet they leave out the first half of this paradox that you have to understand the brutal truths of your reality. And a lot of times they won't give the new initiative as much funding as you want. As a startup, you have to bootstrap it. You don't have the data sets that the legacy business have. As a startup, you don't have any data at all. Right. And so it's brutal in the beginning. And I think the mindset going into campaigns is a lot of times people think it's easy. And that's what kills it because they either, when you report to upper management and leadership, they have unrealistic expectations. Or as a startup, you might pull the plug before you even have a chance because you don't have both sides of that paradox. And so I think I'd like to start off by saying the most important thing that I believe leads to success in a campaign for a new business initiative or a startup is that you have to understand that paradox. There's a brutal truth. It's an ugly uphill climb, but you have to have that unwavering faith that all entrepreneurs do that you're going to prevail in.
I actually have heard that story. I think it was cited in the book, The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday, but I didn't know it by the Stockdale paradox. I just knew the story. But yeah, that's really cool. I feel like I'm going to steal that because in SEO, SEO takes a long time and I need people to understand hey, well, this is not going to be overnight. We got to be committed to this. So yeah, okay. So Stockdale paradox, weave that one into PPC.
Well, it's not necessarily PPC related, but just the mindset you need to approach the campaigns, right? And another theme in regards to PPC in specific is, AI is the hot buzzword of the year. And everything nowadays, every ad platform now either has or is going to soon incorporate strong AI elements into the campaigns. I think a big flaw that people run into is they treat those AI campaigns as a standalone solution. But the biggest mistake marketers can make is assuming it's exactly that. Like it's just a set it and forget it because the AI is smart enough, it's going to figure it out. I think a good example is if you ever use ChatGPT or Bard, I think everyone has, right?
Yeah.
You have to continue to train it, right? If you ask better questions, better data, feed it better data, you give it more detailed input, that leads to the quality of the output that you're looking for. If you asked it 4x4, of course, that's an easy question, but we know that the buyer journey in campaigns can be very abstract and complicated. And a lot of times there are many paths to getting a sale. And so, just like it is when you use ChatGPT, it's no different in ads. You can't just turn a campaign on cold and expect good results. You need to constantly train it. You need to constantly feed it good data because the quality of the input has a direct correlation with quality of the output.
Oh yeah. I've been in ChatGPT hell the last couple of weeks of trying to get it to do things. And sometimes it's infuriating when it just doesn't listen to the directions you gave it to. And so, yeah, I think it's like anything else though. If you try to replace the entire operations with one resource, it's not going to work. I think 10 years ago, it was let me hire an offshore VA to take over my social media management. That never ended up being good. And I think AI is kind of that same route. It's not going to be very good if you just replace it full scale with ChatGPT and everything.
Yeah. And the biggest challenge we've seen in the industry, and I think a lot of your listeners who are marketing managers and decision makers probably have heard the same. We have a direct line as a Google partner agency and a Meta partner to different recs within their companies. And they're pushing so hard for companies to use AI or their AI, Advantage Plus, PMax, things like that. It tends to work best out the gates when you're an existing company that has an existing set of data to feed. A lot of times with new initiatives, a lot of times with startups, they don't have that yet. They make the mistake of throwing all this money into those campaigns. And it ends up burning a lot of cash early with very little results. And that's when people get frustrated and they write the whole thing off when it's just that you didn't use it correctly.
Gotcha. And so that's a perfect loop in because I realized we stepped a little bit away from the Stockdale paradox. But so you had brought up that, I guess, phenomenon or concept. And so can you specify for, these paid campaigns and for a startup or new business initiative, where that manifests in terms of that's how this is the Stockdale paradox in a hard-nosed reality, or how you see it? What's a classic business example of it failing because of the Stockdale paradox, or when it actually succeeds? And I think that would help crystallize that in this kind of avenue.
Yeah. So if we were to tie it into the whole paradox conversation, the biggest mistake I see people make is they think that business is easy, that customer acquisition is easy, that you just need to throw a little money at it and customers will. It's not. It's an extremely competitive marketplace. It's complex systems that decide where your ads show up. And I think a good example, if we want to get granular, is they'll use these AI platforms because they're told to. They'll set up a PMax campaign, turn it on cold. It's a cold start, sales, and in 3 months they burned X thousands of dollars and they give up and they want to pull the plug on it. The brutal truth is the reason why it didn't work is because no one knows you. You're nobody in the space. Your content game is usually weak and you don't have things connected. You don't have a full funnel set up to really feed the campaigns, right? And that's the brutal truth. You just haven't done enough yet. You're a nobody and you have to accept it. But that doesn't mean there's ways out of it. What we do a lot of times, for example, in a Google campaign is we don't start with a max conversion campaign. Google will usually tell you if you're going after sales, start a max conversion campaign. We actually run a manual CPC. We monitor and watch bids singularly, finding out which keywords are cost prohibitive, which ones are working well, which ones are converting. And then once we get to the point where we're generating a certain amount of conversions through the manual campaign, the reason why the whole point is to try to race to X amount of conversions. In Meta, they say get 50. In Google, we found that if you can get as little as 20 to 30 in a 30-day period. That's enough for the system to start optimizing around. But it's a manual process. And when you do it manually, it's a lot of work, right? You're not going to be home by Christmas. You have to work at it. And we go manual first. Once we hit that 20, 30 conversions in a given month, then we switch it to maximize conversions. Mm-hmm. And it's not done there. A lot of times people stop there. We monitor that. Once we see that that's fine-tuned and running well, we run max conversions but we cap the cost per acquisition. And so we slowly try to lower the target CPA. So instead of just saying, go get as many sales as possible, we're manually working in tandem with the system to not only get as many as possible, but we're trying to drive down the cost per acquisition at the same time.
Got it. So it's making sense. And so is the problem of maxing out the conversions is that it literally does not care about any other variable, but just getting conversions, which in the sense, like, doesn't teach you anything. It's like throwing money at a problem. Like, are you actually learning anything from it though?
Right.
Is that kind of what's going on?
Yeah, well, it's that. And at a certain point in the beginning, it is a race for conversions because again, like anything AI related, the better the quality data you can feed the system, the better the output's going to be, right? So initially you just need as many conversions as possible. You need to give it enough conversions so it can learn that ideal customer profile and do its thing and go out and get it. But what you're talking about, that other variable of trying to say, okay, now that we're getting as many as we'd like, we want to either improve the ROAS or lower that CAC, right? And so that's another whole manual process where we start trying to train it to not just get as many, but also take these other variables into account.
And that's why you want to do it manual, because manually, then you can control all of these things and be monitoring it like day to day or week to week.
Unless you're one of those unicorns that are doing 100 sales a day, it's generally like a week to week thing where you go in and make adjustments.
Yeah. You were to communicate this to a team and you do it on a week to week basis. It's because you're saying like, yeah, we need to optimize, but in a sustainable way. Like we have to find a sustainable ad strategy and keyword strategy within that ad strategy. But if we don't manually do it, then it'll become unsustainable in a sense, unless you have unlimited cash, I guess.
Yeah, not necessarily unsustainable, but you never know how good it's going to get until you start continually tweaking, right? And so that's the thing with a lot, when you run a Meta campaign or a Google campaign, it's a lot of people make the mistake of thinking, well, it's working well, so I can leave it alone. Our job as an agency is not just figure out how to make it work well. We try to make it work optimally. Right. And that's where it does take a lot of tweaking and it does take a lot more hand holding than you would think it would, considering the AI is involved.
I like that. You never know how good it can get. Right. And so in a sense, then like a lot of teams are like, they're just stopping too early where you're saying like, if you manually took some control, you could eke out a lot more benefits and sales if you just were in the weeds a little bit more, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of times it's not that they're just stopping too early out of laziness. A lot of times when you're launching a new product or a new business, you wear so many hats and there's so many things to worry about. A lot of times it's just, if it's working okay, you kind of push that aside, right? Because the squeaky wheel gets the grease and it's not squeaking. So you leave it be. So it's not necessarily a negative thing that people do out of laziness or things like that. But it's just, man, with startups, a lot of times you have a team of 5 or 2 that have to do everything. And so it's just a bandwidth issue at that point.
Yeah. That makes sense to me. And so what we have also on the docket, I guess, is specific tactics or strategies for these types of campaigns. So you kind of gave a general structure of them. Can you go a little bit deeper on like we have here, like specific tactics or strategies that you commonly find yourself using or that you recommend to people?
I could probably rattle off 20 different things, but I'll start off with a couple that are slightly outside of the realm of campaigns themselves that have everything to do with it. I think one thing that a lot of times people fail to do is they fail to do any kind of pre-launch data collection.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, because again, starting any campaign cold is always going to take a really long time for it to ramp up and gain momentum. And so it could be as simple as just posting content before the product even launches, doing teaser content, dropping Easter eggs on your profiles just to see what kind of posts are getting engagement. Do teasers to build curiosity, start an email list, run a contest or giveaway, anything like that. So you could at least start getting data, even just to build basic audiences off. A lot of people make the mistake when they launch a new product of taking the product launch date as the day you should start working on campaigns. When in fact, you should be doing a lot of heavy lifting pre-launch, even at the very least, again, build some audiences, test engagement, see what works. Because again, once you have that info, you feed it into the data, it's going to accelerate the learning curve.
When you're saying starting cold, like don't start your ad campaign or your meta campaign with a whole new profile. Like have data sets that you can feed like audiences, emails, or whatever it might be. Essentially warming up. That's essentially what
exactly. Yeah. You do as much as you can to warm up a campaign before you actually launch a new product or a new business.
It's like there's no clean cut. Like we encounter that all the time with SEO. People are like, we're ready for SEO now because the site's live. And I'm like, you should have actually hit us up 60 days ago.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
SEO, it's more important than even on the paid side because it takes so much more time to start gaining traction there.
Correct. Yeah. Okay. So that's a good example of like, trying to get some information beforehand. And you said like just some hard notes examples. Try to get an email, try to get some likes, try to get some engagement like that. You just want something moving, right?
Yeah. Cause remember, you could push all those into all the ad platforms. It just gives it that head start that it needs.
Is there a preferred one? Cause like I often hear emails king, like everyone wants emails. Is there a preferred one that you have of those?
Anything as close to first party data is better, and emails, fits into that. I mean, like engagement audiences, it can be a little more hit and miss because sometimes people just engage with the video because they thought it was cool, even though they had no interest in the product or service. So that is a good point. Yeah. Anything first party is kind of the goal that you're trying to mine here.
Warming up with assets. That's how I translate it. Warm up with some assets to give you a campaign more to have. And so don't fall into the trap of, like there's going to be this big day that everything begins. Like, no, like we really should be training beforehand and warming up beforehand. So just start as early as possible. I feel like an average brand though, and I understand why, but they would be like, no, we don't want to, like, everything should be cohesive. Like we all start on the same day. Like there's a big announcement, right? But you had said something earlier about like Easter eggs. Can you talk about like balancing that? Like what Easter eggs, right? Like if you're going to launch a new service, startup, a business initiative, and you feel some pressure internally about like, when we should have a clean announcement day, like keep it kind of secret. How have you navigated all of that? Because I feel like a lot of people would be like, yeah, I want to do that. But my CEO or my investors are like, no, clean announcement on one day.
Yeah. So that's a very valid point because a lot of companies don't want to let the cat out of the bag too early, right? Yeah. They worry about competitors and things like that. I think that's a mistake. I think people put an overemphasis on competitors knowing what you're doing in advance.
Or if you're like Snoop Dogg, you make its own marketing thing. Did you hear about the Snoop Dogg thing?
I didn't.
So he announced on social media that he's going to stop smoking.
Oh, yeah, I did see that.
And then it ended up being, it's not that he's going to stop smoking. He's being celebrity endorsement for an air frying oven that won't smoke. So the not smoking was his tagline of the ad, but they parsed it out. Only the tagline came out before. So everyone thought he was going to stop smoking. It was just a marketing thing. So I just throw that in because that's a classic example of like, you could parse it out, I guess. You know what I mean? And it created a lot of noise.
Yeah. So I think a good example of that was a few years ago. I was working with a brand who was trying to launch a travel wear line. They were actually doing a complete pivot, or would I say pirouette? I think pivot has a negative term where you get stuck and you have no choice to go in a different way. I always try to take the positive viewpoint of just dance in the face of adversity and do a pirouette and do something better, do something more.
Doesn't one of your kids ice skates? That's funny that you would say pirouette.
Oh, yeah. All my kids play ice hockey. Yeah. So there was a brand who needed to make pivot. They didn't want to let the cat out of the bag too early. They were going into travel wear. And so the first thing they did was start changing their entire IG feed into kind of that wanderlust theme where it's all these exotic travel places around the world. And then they slowly and progressively started shifting it from just wanderlust into focusing on the images shifted from like a beach to cool luggage and things like that, and travel tips and travel hacks. And so they were slowly working their way into building this audience of people who, if they first do the like travel in general, and then they fine tune it by going to people who actually want travel hacks. And then from there, it gave them a head start to, okay, if these people want travel hacks, they're probably traveling. And then they launched the travel wear, the travel clothing after that. So it was a slow process where you had no idea where they're going with it until they actually launched the product. You had no idea what the actual product was going to be, but they were able to build an audience.
It's like the late 2000s, early 2010s of content marketing. It's like you're trying to be not just selling your product, but in the space and being knowledgeable about everything in that space. And whoa, it's so crazy how like a concept like that can come right back. But like, that's a good point. Yeah. Travel hacks and travel wear and everything like that. Okay. So it's like, you don't have to let the cat out the bag. You're not going to hide what industry you're going to be in. Like, what's the point of hiding the industry? It only hurts you actually, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I would have never thought about that. Okay. Interesting on that end. And so they were just essentially grabbing emails and engagement, and then that led cleanly into their launch of whatever campaign next, right?
Mm-hmm.
I love when it's full circle. I was so into content marketing 10 years ago, so it's kind of cool that rings its head right back up and everything.
Right.
I know you said you have 20 on your mind, but do you have any others that pop up in your head?
More in terms of tactic and strategies.
Yeah, for these type of things.
Yeah, I'll say this. It's funny how you just mentioned you were in the content game and you feel like it's come full circle, because it really has.
Yeah.
Now if you were to build, I'll speak specifically towards the quote unquote AI style campaigns, the PMax, the Advantage Plus and things like that, where now the key criteria for success is content. You need to upload for either of them at least 20. Google takes even more, but Meta, for example, recommends at least 20 pieces of content for a single ad, for a single campaign for it to use and learn. And so tactics and strategies, I know it doesn't have to do with like pushing buttons and pulling levers in a campaign, but if you don't have a strong content game, you're going to struggle in these new campaign styles. And I think a lot of times people, especially in the startup space, founders are so focused on product and fine tuning product itself, they neglect the content itself that's needed for success. You probably know this. Influencer marketing was, for the past 2 years, has been like the buzz. I have dealt with it so much. I have found the CAC is through the roof. The ROAS is nominal at best in most cases. And the cost to get a macro influencer is cost prohibitive for most new businesses and things like that. But what I have found is that if you look at influencer marketing from a different lens, instead of looking at it for sales, for revenue, and things like that, for the reach, I group influencers now in that same category as video creators, right? Where I don't pick out conversions with them. I have found that finding micro influencers, a lot of times they'll work for free product, and it's a win-win because you get it for essentially nothing. And they're trying to kind of make their way and build their own audience to become a macro influencer someday. I found you can give away product or pay very little money, negotiate to own the content where you have permissions to use it however you want. And if you do that, if your content game is weak, and not to bring ageism into this because I fit in the category, but I've seen so many times where businesses, managers, startup people in the maybe starting ages 40s and up, they're just weak at content creation. Again, I'm in that demographic. I watch my 11-year-old make her hockey TikTok videos and I'm amazed at how well she could edit. And I'm not like that, right? But if you look at influencer marketing less as revenue generation and more as affordable content, you can take those, you can slice them up, throw them into your ad campaigns. And without needing to spend $500 or $1,000 on a video editor to come shoot your product and create a handful of reels.
Okay, we know it's like 10x that price. Yeah. It's like 10x that price to do that. Yeah.
I was thinking the college kid who's willing to come over.
Oh, yeah. No, I was thinking about the production company that's going to come to your reels. Yeah.
But you can give away product to these micro influencers, have them create video of all different styles for essentially free. You take that content, throw it into your campaigns. And now without needing to be an expert on content creation and UGC, you're able to give your campaigns a foothold that it is.
And so you find that there's a lot of micro influencers or video people who would welcome doing it at a free to an affordable cost. Like you've encountered it more than a couple of times and everything.
Yeah. And you have to temper your expectations. They're not going to be as good as Kim Kardashian making a video for you. But you have to remember a lot of these new initiatives, a lot of startups, they have limited resources. So it's a lot better than what you would have got. You get a lot more mileage out of it. And so I bring this up in tactic because the campaign tactics, they require so much good content that a lot of small business owners, they just don't have the skill set. That's just a good, affordable way to get yourself some content to get going.
So that's actually the question I was going to go back to is like just putting it on the table. Can you be as specific as possible? What do you consider as bad content? Because I think, I'm an SEO agency. You're on the paid side. Bad content is kind of the same meaning, but it can manifest differently for us. So like, can you tell me exactly what you see as bad content?
And so the absolute worst is stock. And we still get clients who send us stock photos, stock videos, things like that. That's the absolute worst. The second is when there is no personality to it. The ad space has become so homogenized where everything starts to look the same after a while, especially when you start looking at industry specific ads.
Oh, yeah.
You really have to have some personality to it to set yourself apart. And with influencers in particular, you can kind of craft your message with them. And they inherently have a personality. The reason why you would choose them is based on, you look at their past content and you think it's a good fit based on the way they look, the way they talk. And so I guess to flip that around again, the bad content is the stuff that has no personality. If you have a technical product or a technical service and all you're talking about is the science behind it, science rarely sells. I mean, you know this, the buyer's journey is less linear and binary and more emotional, right? And so spewing off scientific facts about your product or technical specs, a lot of times that just doesn't do it. They have to like you, trust you, or respect you. And if your content doesn't portray one of those three things, it's going to fail.
What are the three things again?
They have to either like your content, trust the stuff in the content, or respect. And that means the depth of knowledge when I say respect.
There's the professor.
Ideally, you can hit all three, in the perfect world, but you have to have at least one. And bad content is soft on all of those.
Got it. And to tie that into the AI, there's the AI tools can help you create that content. But if you're feeding it stock, it's going to create stock. So you're saying that like you need to essentially show that personality, show that edge, and that the micro influencers or the content creators help that a long way really quickly.
Yeah, because AIs can be divided into a number of different segments. A lot of it on the forward-facing side that we get to see in campaigns is the machine learning, right? And so the reason why they want 20 in Google, I think you could throw up to 50 pieces of content in there, is it's all just machine learning. It's seeing what's hitting, what's not, and it starts showing more of what's working, what's not. And then when you start seeing that, you can double down on what's working. Yeah, you can imagine, we have a client here, I won't out them by their name, but we keep asking for fresh content. They keep sending us these carousel videos of stock images, and all the video is stock images. They're rolling through carousel style with music in the background. And there's nothing unique. There's nothing that says, ooh, that's so cool, I want to click on this. And because of that, the campaign struggles, and there's only so much we could do if we don't have the right equipment to make it work.
The theme is full circle because it is so funny. I remember when I was going to school, TV's commercials were on the way out. So we didn't really spend much time on commercials. But I remember learning like most commercials about products literally almost never show the product. Like they're doing something else. And now that we're running these ads, like now it's like, okay, you got to take those concepts and bring it to the future. Like no one's just staring at your product and be like, wow, I really like how that chassis looks. You know what I mean? It's like, no, like have it in action. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The other thing I was thinking about is the content creator and the micro influencer part is really interesting. So do you just go discover them on your own? How would one begin to go look for them? You know, because they're inherently like they're micro, so you don't probably already know about them and they probably don't have a big following. So how do you go about that?
Yeah, if you go to any influencer marketing platform, which is basically just an exchange, a marketplace, influencers sign up for those and they show everything from the number of reach, what they charge, and then you can categorize them based on micro. So, if there's an influencer that has 1 million followers or 500,000, you'll see their rates are probably cost prohibitive for new initiatives. But you can find those that have 100,000 or less in terms of followers, but have a high engagement. They also show the engagement percentage for each influencer.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, so you could find those that have lower reach, but you just love their style, right? You love what they do. You love how they put together their videos. And if it matches your brand, you reach out to them. And these marketplaces, you can Google it and find a handful of them.
Just for the pod, can you name like the ones you like?
For small businesses, for the micro stuff, I would say the newest one that I see people using is Social Cat.
Social Cat. Okay.
I don't get paid for this. No endorsement.
I'm trying to get paid for this. I'm just kidding.
But the reason why I bring that up in particular is because their whole niche that they carved out is for small businesses, smaller budgets with micro influencers, right? Because it's quite a jungle to try to fight through when you go to these platforms and they have so many, it's just such a broad range. Social Cat kind of realized there's a gap in the market for people who need good but affordable influencers. And that's where they're attacking.
So I guess something that was interesting is that you spoke on something, but I think you're like the first person to actually give a hard-nosed answer to it, which is I've heard other people say, don't use influencers or an influencer strategy for a strict ROI game? Because I heard you're just never going to win that. You might have blips where like, oh, it actually did really well and you believe, and then over time it just starts to peter out. How do you value, because it sounds like you're still using it. So is your first value that like, oh, that gets you free content, and then second is the exposure? Or how do you value the influencer strategy, for example, your clients? Like if you're asking them for budget, how are you valuing it to them?
Let me start by saying, I'm not saying influencer marketing is bad or terrible. I think what I'm saying is when I've seen it work, it's usually when you go to the macro level and you're dropping 5 to 6 figures per influencer post.
Okay. 5 or 6 figures per influencer post.
Yeah.
Okay.
At the very least. Obviously, there's like Kardashians of the world that charge way more than that. But so I'm not saying it's all bad. What my whole point is that I don't view influencer marketing as marketing. I view influencer marketing as purely as content creation, a way to get good, affordable content. And that's the big difference, I think, between me, the way I view it, and other people, because it's similar to, I guess, getting into the weeds. I kind of group it like TikTok right now in terms of actual campaigns. I've seen TikTok work phenomenally for products or services that are under $20-ish. It works hit and miss in that $50 range and terrible for anything above that. And so if you don't fit in that low end price market, if you consider your product up market and your pricing matches up with that, it's not that TikTok is bad. I just don't view it as a conversion tool. I view it purely as top of funnel because the reach is amazing. The CPM's better than any other platform out there, but it's going to be top of funnel. You can't expect conversions for it, right? So similarly, you just kind of have to realize that everything isn't there for conversions in a campaign. You have to understand what each platform is good at and have that, you kind of put those puzzle pieces together to make it work for your business.
What I would walk away with then is like, the content in itself is already what's worth going for the influencer strategy, but it still will help you on the marketing side from maybe an exposure and reach side. For a specific reason or specific example for me is I'm very partial to YouTube. I love YouTube, like the platform I probably love the most. And I don't think I've ever bought something over, I don't know, like $100 or maybe $200 without watching some influencer talk about it on YouTube before I buy it. And so I also see it as a last bottom of funnel social proofing way as well. So to your point, like, I don't think that person would ever get credited the ROI because they would never know I really watched that, because I'm not buying through their link. I'm just double checking because it's already in my cart, but I just want to verify that they like it, the pitfalls that they see, and then I'll go buy it in my cart already, right?
Right.
And so I've never heard from the content creation side, but I think that completely flips on its head for me, because honestly, before this conversation, you were like, oh, you're like influencer marketing the last 2 years has been kind of going up. And I thought I was dead. I actually didn't know. I hate influencer marketing. Like you said, you don't hate it. I hate it. I hate influencer marketing, but I never thought of it from the content angle. That's really cool, actually.
Yeah. So let me clarify. As a performance marketer, I hate it.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you for agreeing with me, because I hate influencer marketing.
The analytics on it, I've rarely seen it pay off. But again, that's why I look at it from a completely different lens. I realize it's still a good source of affordable content that you can, as long as you can negotiate and get the rights to the content, you can repurpose that. And it's a very affordable way to do so.
There you go. That's another big key. The rights to the content is what makes, okay, gotcha. Yeah. You know what's interesting is that we do that on the link building side on Zupo, is that like, we do a lot of pitching to publications. And to your point, we're not pitching to the household name publications because one, they're paid. And, there's all these like stipulations about them and like you can't do anything. But there's that middle 80% of publications that like, hey man, they want to play ball. They're trying to get big too. And they will love to interact with the businesses that want to interact with them. But they're not desperate per se, but they're very open to collaboration because everyone only pays attention to the top, 10% of publications. So that I just didn't think about that from an influencer side. I'm going to probably go hit up some influence. I don't know about how to do for SEO, but that's something totally different. All right. You told me to warn you when we go too long into one topic, but that warranted one topic. I think that was cool. Any pitfalls and mistakes though, on the flip side? You talked about a couple strong things, anything that you'd be like, don't do this.
I've been staying kind of high level, so I'll try to get more granular with this for your listeners.
I think it was granular. I think it was good. I think you're in a big place. Yeah.
I think there's a number of things. One, in Google in particular, when you create a new campaign, the setup flow automatically takes you into what's called a smart campaign. And we have found this spends more money with way less control. And so we always tell people bypass this completely. I already went into the whole idea that we always go manual in the beginning. So stay away from smart campaigns. We've seen it, the ROI be just 2 to 3 times worse in a smart campaign than when we do it the manual route.
Even if the internal team doesn't have the knowledge of paid, like you may, would you still recommend going manual though?
Yes, the smart campaign in general, I hate to say never, but I really can't remember the last time it has performed well for a client. So I just don't recommend it at all, no matter what.
Okay. So even your basic knowledge of trying to learn something is probably going to do better than the smart one.
Exactly. In Google, never use broad match.
Oh, yeah. I remember back when I dabbled in PPC, I remember that one. Yeah, don't use broad match, right?
Yeah, it just pulls in too many unrelated keywords to waste money on people who don't need to be seeing your ads. You need a huge list of negative keywords if you're going to make it work. It just requires a bigger budget than a lot of these, like a startup or a new business initiative needs to, or really has. I think in Google Analytics, what I see a lot of times, and people don't even realize, is when you log in and go to your conversion setting, you can set primary and secondary conversions.
On GA4 now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of times people don't bother going in and marking the one that should be the primary conversion and then all the rest that should be secondary. And again, going back to the whole AI thing, quality of input equals quality of output, right? If you're telling the system, this is the conversion I want to optimize around, and technically it's your secondary because you forgot to switch it to primary, then it's going to alter the results of.
Oh, so your entire campaign is almost a wash then because you're doing the wrong conversion, essentially. Yeah. Which is our equivalent in SEO of like, you're optimizing for the wrong keyword that you would never rank for. Like that happens all the time for us. And we're like, okay. And it's not to say you wasted 3 months, but you wasted 3 months. Like we're not going anywhere with a lot of that, right?
Yeah, I'd say the last one that I see specifically to what we're talking about here at startups, new business initiatives, new product launches, is people try to make too many changes. They go in on a daily basis and tinker around with it. Both Meta and Google, Meta specifically calls it a learning phase. Google, if you talk to their reps, they do say there's a learning process. Every time you make a change, it kicks things back into learning. And so if you're constantly changing things every day, it's never going to clear learning where you're going to be able to truly see the results of what you're trying to accomplish. And so on a larger scale, we always tell people your campaign, if you're patient, just make moderate changes throughout. Your campaign is going to look very different after 120 days than it will after 30 days. You just kind of have to be able to sit on your hands for a bit and let things play out.
You sound like us now on SEO side.
Not quite as long as SEO, but the concept is similar.
And to add to those as well, you had mentioned earlier, stop using bad stock photos and boring content and stuff. I know this is going to be a rather unanswerable question, but I still would like to hear your input because you're a performance marketer. You're not a creative. You're a performance marketer. So I feel like creatives don't answer this well, which is how would a person know that it's bad content, right? And I think there's generally the eye test, but do you ever have any way of telling clients like, this is how you would know that you're going the wrong way?
The easiest way is to run it organic first and check the engagement rates.
Oh, see, that's the first data backed way that anyone has ever answered me. Okay, that's a great way to think about it. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and so that's probably the easiest way. In Meta, for example, you can actually test it both ways. You might not want it on your feed. If it's a different style that doesn't mesh with your brand, but you want to test, if you take an organic post, you can, one, standalone, you can get engagement. You could also boost it, right? And when you boost it, all the engagement data stays on the organic post. However, you can take the same piece of content, run it in an ad. It doesn't show up on your organic feed. And the engagement data, even though it's the exact same piece of content, won't show up in the organic number. So you can really do a true split test in that scenario as well.
Oh, so that's where, like, if you're playing with different vibe, brand looks or whatever, you could do one organic and one paid or multiple paid to see which one caught better and everything.
Yeah. You could take similar format and test different audiences that way. But to me, the easiest way is to test a piece of content in organic. Even if in the worst case scenario, you post it, you don't think it meshes with your brand, and you just let it run for a week or two and then delete it out of your grid. So that's probably the low-hanging fruit, the most effective way and the quickest way to know.
Okay, no, that's good. Because honestly, the answer I typically hear, which I get it, but I don't love it, is eye test. Like, oh yeah, you can just tell it's bad. And I'm like, if you don't do this for a living, it's hard to gauge your eye test to our eye test, right? You and I see ads every day, so we know what separates from the spread. But someone who's new to it, I don't know if they would, or not new to it, but not seeing ads every day, I don't know if they would be able to tell.
Yeah, no, we've done this a lot. I mean, there's a client that comes to mind that their campaign is phenomenal. I think the ROAS, it ranges depending on the ad set from 30 to 45x ROAS.
That's holy cow.
I know we're in the wrong business, right?
Holy cow. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Obviously that's like,
Unicorn kind of thing.
Most campaigns. But I remember with them, they had these long format DIY videos, 30 minutes long. And initially our knee-jerk reaction was, no, we're not going to run that 30-minute. Like if you get someone's attention for 5 seconds on a video, that's considered good. But you have to test it. So we throw it up there. We start running A/B, we start running split tests, and it's not performing better, but the surprise is it's performing as well as their short format content and reels. And so we kept it in there. We realized it's just a different audience that engages with the long format versus the short. And so, yeah, there is a way to put numbers behind good and bad, even though the terms good and bad seem very abstract.
Trophy for you, because you're the first person to ever have a data-backed answer for that. Because everyone's like, oh, just show it to 5 people in your office and ask them what they think. I'm like, well, but still, like that's not the most scientific way to go about that, right?
So you kind of grated my nerve there with that comment. I will add this. This is for any of the startup people listening. The worst thing you could do when you're trying to launch a business is listen to your friends and family. They're going to tell you it's good. They like it. You're going to do well. And again, you better be ready with that Stockdale paradox because you're going to hit some brutal truths fast. I co-founded a few companies in the past, and whenever we launched, we never told friends and family because we wanted a clean data set. And so we don't want friends and family signing up, subscribing, buying just to help us out. While it's great and we appreciate it, it ruins the data at that. It skews it.
You know what's so interesting about that? I have an episode it'll probably be 2 or 3 episodes before yours, where I interviewed someone who does YouTube for a living. Like he's a YouTuber, but he ran a business before. So he's kind of got that perfect mix of business and YouTube. And he was saying that when you start a channel, the worst thing to do is send it to your friends and family because YouTube is trying to understand the audience for your videos. But if you send it to your friends and family and they watch it, YouTube is going to try to mimic that audience you send it to. And that's not going to be your audience because it's just your friends and family who are just watching it out of, pure friendship or whatever, right? And so when you say that, even on the YouTube level, he's very big about it's better to just publish it in the void than to send it to your friends and family.
I would stand by that 100%.
So interesting. It's funny because the reason I say it is because like when you're talking about it, it sounds like more of like an emotional thing. Like, oh yeah, don't get tricked into thinking about it. But even from a hard-nosed AI ad platform or channel platform, it does hurt if you skew the data to all that. Or in the beginning, you're not even skewing the data. You're just like, you're going the wrong way. Like it's not worse, but terrible data that means nothing. Where I kind of wrap up with the final kind of question or topic is, this is one that I think is a school of thought question, but I want to get your thoughts on it because I have a strong opinion about this, is for new initiatives, product line or startups, everything's fresh. How do you approach and ultimately balance the different paid channels? So do you start with all of them and then only focus on the one that catches? Do you focus on one and then when it starts to work, then you go to the next one? Or do you just go for all and all of them have to start catching? What is your general go-to style for, the new initiatives or product lines?
Yeah. So I actually I wouldn't even call it a formula, but I generally go with Meta and Google lead the way for it, mainly because usually it's rare that a new product or a new business has the time, the bandwidth, and the budget to try to build brand equity and awareness for the first 6 months and have all their spend go to that, right? They need cash flow. And so to me, Meta and Google have proven time and again to have the lower CAC, at least out of the paid channels. I do incorporate TikTok, but again, kind of how I mentioned before, I use that as top of funnel. I don't look at that as a conversion metric. I throw a very small percentage, usually about 10% of the budget to TikTok, sometimes less. Mm-hmm. And that's purely to get the eyeballs because it is I don't like to use the word cheap. It is more affordable in terms of CPM on that platform to start feeding top of the funnel. And then from there, it's kind of what you're saying. Depending on the product, we've dealt with some luxury products, for example, or some new products that are just there's no direct competition because it's so new and almost off the wall that the conversions, it just takes a lot of time to go off with. And so a lot of times what we'll do is start optimizing, going the manual route instead of the AI route. Start optimizing for add to carts. And then once we hit a good amount of those, we switch it and optimize towards initiate checkouts. Mm-hmm. And then once we feel it's getting enough of those that are leading conversions, then we'll go full bore into the AI to try to optimize around conversions. What we always do is start with Meta and Google. It's usually close to a 50-50 split, sometimes 60-40 skewing towards Google because depending on the keyword mix and things like that, it can be a little bit higher in terms of cost. Use TikTok only as top of funnel. And then from there, just see what hits. And I see what hits. Again, I'm not talking about sales. If those are slow going, look at the other events that are firing and slowly start working your way up the ladder from there.
So, Google and Meta, you probably start there because of proficiency, your agency has. But do you start with Google and Meta because they just have the widest audience? Like that's just the widest audience you can start with?
Yes, it has the widest audience, but it's two things. One, Google lets us really pinpoint users with strong intent based on keywords, right? Because you can go really long tail with keywords and hone in. There's such a thing on Google as going too tight where it won't even fire impressions. But for the most part, you can really hone in with match types and long tail to get the right kind of users to the site to start getting the event count going. And then the meta pixels, or what they call it, I think data sets now, they changed the name, starts feeding off of that data. So Google, we use to get as close to the bottom of the funnel initial visitors. Meta feeds off of that. It's more mid-funnel. Remarketing obviously is bottom funnel. TikTok, and things like that, because it's so affordable, we just start showing the top that way.
And the TikTok side, you talk a lot about just getting eyeballs on it, but I'm assuming you're trying to get eyeballs, but still also get visits to the website to get engagement data. That's why you're trying to get the eyeballs, right?
Correct.
And ideally, they can sign up for something and you get their first party data, but is it more so just the engagement on the site, or are you trying to get actual like first party data from the TikTok? And the realistic goal of the two, yeah.
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. Ideally, the website will have some kind of CTA where you can capture their email somehow, but it's also all about the pixel data collection. If you can get these people, even though it's top of the funnel, if you can get them to start segmenting them by the number of pages they viewed or which page they viewed, instead of just coming on the home page, you can slowly start to triangulate based on the signals and carve out I guess you can say broad traffic. You can start carving out some of the ones who you think would be good to continue to market to.
Oh, because for one, if they're clicking onto your website, that's already one engagement point. That's a big deal. But then how they're interacting with the website, it's like, I'm going to just make things up. If someone looks at the About Us page and then a product, then you're like, okay, well, that's a good segment. But someone who clicked on, watched one video and left, could be a good segment, but still could also just be like, yeah, it's not the most telling of a customer audience. So it's just, again, like an affordable way to just feed. It's like affordable casting a wide net and seeing what actually is happening, essentially, right?
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And with Google Tag Manager, there gives you a lot of flexibility. That's another thing. Glad this came to mind. I think Google Tag Manager is very underutilized as a tool in terms of being able to track custom conversions instead of just the usual add to cart, initiate checkout, purchase, things like that. But you can use Google Tag Manager to track the scroll length on a page. Did they go halfway down a page?
Oh, yeah.
And then you could have it fire a custom event into your meta pixel, for example.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize I could connect into the pixel side or data set side or whatever. Yeah.
It does get tricky. That's where it does take a lot of time to learn and to figure out how to set up correctly. But it is a very helpful tool once you figure that out.
Everything analytics promises is actually Tag Manager. That's what I've learned. Yeah. Everything that they promise, like you can do this and this. I'm like, well, actually, no, it's Tag Manager that is the engine. Analytics is just where you see it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but you don't hear a lot of businesses using Tag Manager. And if they do, it's just for basic pixel placement. They don't realize the depth of information you can get from it.
I feel like 95% of businesses that talk about the tracking that they do, they're out of the box analytics tracking that they're doing, which, okay, forthright, we are not the most advanced tracking agency there is. Like we do the basic amounts that we need, but most people I don't think are even hitting nearly as much as they could be. But Tag Manager is like one of those, it's like WordPress to me. It's like so customizable that's intimidating in the beginning, but it's the avenue to get everything. Michael, I guess where we naturally want to go is, what's the best way for people to interact with you, man?
Yeah, website is NetSolutions with 2 T's, netsolutionspppc.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. Just look for my name, Michael Wan. Other than that, if people know you, Jason, I'm sure you can make a nice introduction as well.
Yes. We can go get coffee, or we can go get wine at the house area, which we haven't done yet, by the way.
I know. We'll make it happen.
Every time I'm around there, I'm like looking at the building and I'm like, he's probably over there right now, isn't he? Yeah. All right, Mike. Well, I really do appreciate the time. I think this was awesome, man. Like the TikTok conversation, the micro influencers, I already kind of want to go on and take a look at myself. But to the listeners, Mike's one of the smartest ad people I know. And how long have you been in the industry, man?
20 plus years. I'm old.
Yeah, so he's a veteran. So he's like lasted through every different iteration of it. So I think Mike often has a lot of great data. You just need to speak more, because I don't think you have much content out there. But you need to go on more podcasts, and you're always like a wealth of knowledge.
Appreciate it. Maybe this is the start of my content creating career.
I'm not giving you the rights to this video, by the way.
We'll talk about that over coffee or wine.
Awesome. Well, Mike, I always appreciate it, man. And thanks, dude.
All right. Thank you.